So, good morning, everybody who has joined us here on this slightly grey morning. Welcome to our webinar looking at the topic of functional safety with specific particular emphasis on the application for logistics. So, as I say, for this morning, I'm just hosting. So my two colleagues over in Germany are going to be presenting this subject to you. So I guess my first lovely task is to introduce them to you. So over in Germany, we have Stefan Kraus and Daniel Heinzler. So Daniel, maybe you would like to introduce yourself first.
Yes, thank you very much. Also a warm welcome to all the attendants from our side here in rainy southern Germany. Quite a few people interested in the topic. So my name is Daniel Heinzler. I joined HMS about 2 years ago as a product manager for functional safety solutions. Before that, I worked in the machine building industry where I had experience from the safety side, more from a machine builder side. So which also affects maybe a lot of you people. I did that for 10 years, and as I said, joined HMS 2 years ago. And with me here is my colleague Stefan Kraus, who will introduce himself.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Stefan. I'm with HMS for more than 20 years. Started there as a developer, growing into the scope of functional safety very early, coming from the developer side. But since then, I was doing product management for functional safety, so dealing with all the aspects of safe, soft, and hardware issues and standards as well. So that's why we are today sitting here and want to share our experience with functional safety with all of you in the webinar.
Great, thank you both. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today in the webinar. So introduction, who are you listening to? Well, we have introduced ourselves and we're talking about logistics viewing of functional safety. So the first part of the presentation is going to be explaining how safety is viewed from a logistics application and the specific topics that are relevant to logistics. Then we're going to be covering something about the current standards and the regulations and how they link together. Then we're looking a little bit into the future and the upcoming EU machinery regulations, where the changes are and how those need to be applied within the logistics. And of course, at the end, we want to give you an opportunity to ask us any questions. So we'll have a short session at the end after the wrap up where we will answer any questions. And as I said, please post those in the chat for this webinar and we will pick those and answer what we can at the end of this webinar. So that's what you're in for. I think, first of all, I'm going to be handing over to Daniel to talk about the current safety situation in logistics. So yes. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much for this great introduction. As Siobhan introduced just now, we're going to start with the general topic of safety and logistics applications, which can be a pretty broad topic. So we wanted to show you, okay, which aspects of logistics are affected by safety at all, and basically it's everything. So we try to sketch up a little logistics process here on the slide where you see, okay, we got some stuff coming in, some moving of boxes happening, some production in between, and then when the part is finished, the finished goods also have to go somewhere. So we have a lot of different parts where work is done or where boxes are moved or where potential hazards could occur. We have a very important topic with growing automation in this business, in the logistics industry. Overall, we have more and more robotics coming in. This has several reasons. Sometimes it's hard to get really good people to do that. Sometimes it's really we want, and one of the key aspects here is this safe collaboration between humans and machines. Wherever humans get in contact with machines, there is a potential hazard. Like if you have like a conveyor belt up there, you have to make sure that no one squeezes their hands or any other limbs, stuff like that, or in a shelf to make sure no one cuts himself. So there are endless numbers of topics in the logistics where you have to be safe to make sure no one gets hurt. That's exactly the topic. The main topic, what safety is for, is to avoid accidents. So the safety really is protecting humans from machines. Why do you want to avoid accidents? That's easy. You don't want your people, your highly skilled, trained people to not be there to help you in the future or to do your logistics application, and of course to reduce downtime. So every accident not only harms people, it also costs time and money, and that's the basic thing what all the accountants in logistics are looking for. So that's one main topic, why you need or why you want a safe process, where you make sure you don't have any accidents and you don't have any unplanned downtimes. To help you with that, there is a lot of paperwork to go through in the form of standards and regulations, especially in the EU, because the EU is kind of leading in this whole standards topic, where you have for every of those different steps, you have a vast amount of standards that help you making sure your process is safe. And so to get a bit deeper into those standards, basically, what is the approach of those standards? The approach is always, we have kind of a safety life cycle where in every standard, like here, the 61508, which is more a standard for developers of safe hard or software, where you have to make sure the whole process of developing this device that you want to sell, you have to make risk analysis. You have to make sure you cover every basis, that nothing goes wrong with your final product. So you see one safety lifestyle, one possible safety life cycle here that goes from conception to basically decommission. The same if you're more maybe an integrator or machine builder, it's more maybe you heard of the ISO 12100, which basically tells you, you have to do a risk analysis for your machines from construction to disposal. So every single step of the way, you need to do risk assessment to make sure that no one gets hurt using, transporting, or disposing of your machine. So that's just a broad overview how this system works. There's just to show you every aspect, there is some regulation or some safety issue to cover. And now we go a bit more into the standards and regulations themselves. So here we have this neat little, we call it the safety house of Europe, where you see on the top you have, especially in the European Union, you have this EU machinery directive, which covers all the bases for machine builders, or which is mandatory even for them to be able to put a CE sign on their machine. Every machine imported or sold in or put into production in the EU needs a CE sign. To get the CE sign, you have to comply with the EU machinery directive. So this is above all. This is a document where we go into detail a bit later in this webinar, which helps you or which tells you what you have to do to get your machine safe. Because this is sometimes a bit, up to interpretation. You have below this, you have the standards, like ISO standards or DIN standards, EN standards. There's whole lot of different types of standards that help you follow this requirements from the EU machinery legislation, like the machinery directive. You see on the right side the hierarchy. The most important is the machinery directive, because it's mandatory. Then you have the so-called Type C standards, which are type standards for specific types of machines. Below that, you have B standards, which is more of the safety system altogether. And below that, on the lowest level, you have the Type A standard, like the 12100 you saw earlier, which is just covering the basic needs for machine safety. Like the machinery directive tells you, you have to do a risk analysis. The ISO 1200 tells you how to do this risk analysis. And then if you go to the C standards, for example, here, the 3691-4 covers industrial trucks or AGVs, AMRs. If you are an AGV, AMR builder, this is your main document, the 3691-4, that tells you, you do this and you will comply with the machinery directive. So those standards, the goal of those standards always is to become a harmonized standard. Harmonized means but in EU law, if you follow the standard, you follow the machinery directive. So everyone wants to have harmonized standards to build their safety on. So now we have in the EU, we have a specialty. Last year, maybe you heard, June last year, the European Union itself finalized a document for a new legislation. It's called now the Machine Regulation, which will be valid from 2027, January 2027, where you have a lot more to cover when it comes to safety and security. Stefan will tell you about that a little later. And that means with this document is new, all those harmonized standards will have to be reevaluated. So this, where it also comes, because we hear a lot that a manufacturer says, yeah, we are compliant with 12100 or compliant with 3691 or whatever. Just because you're now doesn't mean you will be in the future. So this needs reevaluation of every single machine, every single standard will have to be reevaluated with this new machinery regulation. How this works, how those standards work together, Stefan will tell you a bit more about now.
Let's have a look at what is the benefit of a harmonized standard. So by looking into the existing currently valid machinery directive and also into the new machinery regulation that is coming up, they both focus on the basic task of making a system safe. So that's first of all identifying and handling machine and system risks. So you see on the left side below here, you have the system risk, and the goal of this risk analysis and risk reduction is to reduce the machine risk to a remaining risk level. How to do that? Well, there are different approaches. And the most common one, which we find in the harmonized standard ISO 12100, is doing this by 3 steps. First of all, doing a risk assessment, which is clearly described in this ISO standard, then followed by applying protective measures by design. And in the end, what you cannot prevent from happening by design, you have to forward these requirements to the users. So this is a type A standard, so it's very high level, sometimes hard to apply, especially if you're a machine builder, for example, for mobile machines, AGVs. Well, here harmonization brings a lot of benefits because the harmonized standards, they start like the ISO 3691-4, which, by the way, is not fully officially harmonized yet. It's on the way, but it's not yet officially approved. But these type C standards, they are more applicable. So they will tell you exactly what are the hazards, the risks that you can assume for certain applications like mobile trucks, like AGVs, automated guided vehicles. The next step is these harmonized standards also describe the needed safety functions and also define the risk reduction levels. So for certain safety functions that are needed, that the machine does not harm people, you already get the measures and the safety levels you have to achieve, defined by the Type C standard. That makes them very handy to apply. And whenever you have a Type C standard, I think it's a good idea to follow them. Yeah, and finally, it follows all the same process. Like the ISO 12100, the 3 steps: assessing, designing, and forwarding hazards and risks. You find exactly the same in the harmonized standard. And that makes them so very important in the whole regulation, in the whole standardization scheme that we have in the European Union today. Well, sometimes there are contradictions, and that's also what Daniel was saying before. These standards have to be harmonized with each other. We had, for example, some contradictions in previous versions of the ISO 3691-4. They have been ruled out now, and now it's on the way to be harmonized so that the different standards from Type A to Type C don't tell different things all the time. Well, coming to acceptance of standards, Daniel, what about the UK? I think they have left the European Union. So are these standards also applicable for them in the future?
Yes, that's kind of a, I think most of you have heard that a few years ago, the UK decided to split ways with the European Union. And this also has impact on the topic of safety or machine safety in the UK, because in the past, the UK, there was also this machinery directive was valid with the harmonized standards below it. This will change in the future. So this new regulation coming from January 2027 will not automatically be applicable in the UK. So now if you build machines or devices outside of the UK and want to import it there, or if you're in the UK yourself, you don't put a CE sign on your device or machine anymore. You put on the UK CA sign. So currently it's about the same. So the CE sign is still accepted in the UK until some deadline. Because the standards currently are still the same, but as soon as there will be change in the EU, the new regulation is not automatically compliant with the UKCA conformance testing. So that means each future machine safety legislation, the future of UK machine legislation is currently not defined yet. It's under review. The question is, okay, will they go the same way as the EU? Will they copy the document? Will they do the same thing? Will they do something completely on their own? It's not 100% clear now. This kind of puts machine builders, device manufacturers, and also integrators in a bit of a tough situation, because you have this huge EU market outside and another market in the UK. So this means if you're in the UK, want to export to the EU, this new machinery regulation will also affect you. So this means yeah, you cannot just say, yeah, I'm sitting in the EU, it doesn't concern me. Also, if you're in the US, if you're in Asia, as soon as you want to import a machine into EU, you have to abide by those standards. So to make that a bit easier for you, we want to give you a broad, short overview over the new machinery regulation, or more, Stefan is doing that. I hope you can tell us a bit more about what will come up in the new machinery regulation.
Yeah, I'll try to summarize that. So I was digging into that document also during the last year, figuring out, well, what are the main changes here? And I was starting with the current directive. It stems from 2006. Just by counting the words, you see it's 28K words, 63 pages. Comparing this to the new standard that will come up, being valid from 2027, we see that the number of words even have nearly doubled, and also the number of pages has tremendously grown. So you see, there are changes coming, there were additions, and yeah.
And there's always the question, well, is this just more words for the same thing, or is it actually more substantial add-ons to this legislation? And that's also where Stefan tried to make it a bit more visual, to let you see, okay, what exactly is added really substantially to this regulation. I think you can show this.
Yeah, it was not totally reinvention of the wheel, the new standard. So currently we have, for example, the risk assessment, risk reduction. That is a strong part of the machinery directive today. Also, definition of harmful machines or semi-finished products or responsibilities are defined by the standard. So what else can be added? There's not so much more, but well, actually there is. So new things come up. You can imagine the old standard stems from 2006 and before. So state-of-the-art technology has changed. And therefore, the new regulation, which was now worked out over the last years, was focusing more on the state-of-the-art technologies and problems, which are, for example, safety and security. We find a lot of add-ons in terms of safety and security features in the new standard. And also, interestingly, the mobile machines are one of the dominant add-ons in terms of definition of harmful machines. They hadn't been mentioned before in the directive before. Maybe they have been hardly part of the standard, but they were not fully covered. And now with the new regulation, they're explicitly named in this standard, which makes it very important and interesting also for the logistics industry to look into what is newly coming here. But for the semi-finished products, software-based safety functions, this is a really strong trend. So you can ship your machine without full equipped safety software on it. So you can still modify the safety functions in the field. That is now explicitly covered by the new standard. And also the responsibilities of people distributing or importing the machines has changed. I will come to more details later on. So responsibilities were added in the new regulations. Two totally new things compared to the old standard was self-evolving safety functions. Sounds a bit like science fiction today, but yeah, actually this standard has to last for the next 10-15 years. So it's anticipated what is coming in this new EU regulation. And also this explicit adding of AGV AMR safety functions. That's something very new. We didn't find that in the regulation before.
So overall, there's not too much entirely new coming. So everything was there, kind of. It's a lot of just specification. Or could you maybe go into detail to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the new standard is clarifying a lot of things that were not clear before, and also adding new things. So focus areas that I found was safety and security. This is a strong topic. We find in a lot of new functions, requirements, the safety and security topics. Then also the electronic machine documentation. That was also a point before for machine builders, where to store, where to put the machine documentations. Now it's explicitly described how to access and where to put the machine documentation and how to make it accessible for the machine users. The third thing is substantial modifications. It was mentioned in the standard before, but now it's become more clear what a substantial modification is. I will give you some examples on that later. The next thing is self-evolving functionalities. It's one of the trends. AI is not explicitly mentioned, but the standard already tells about self-evolving machines that optimize their behavior. And finally, that's what safety is all about, adapting to state of the art, also the state of the art of the workers. And therefore, the standards also have to deal with new technologies that are applicable here. Then safety software functions, as said before, adding software to a machine to integrate a safety function. This is now explicitly allowed and also limited under which conditions it is allowed. The mobile machines are added, and machine documentation. Logging of data, especially of remote access, modification of machine parameters. That's also a big part of the standard, dealing with all these modifications and how to trace who was doing what with the machine. And finally, the responsibilities. We had seen it briefly before. It was distributors and integrators were explicitly added here in the standard. Well, coming to some details regarding the responsibility, for example. In the previous standard, we just had the manufacturers and authorized representatives explicitly named. So it was clear the machine is under the responsibility of these two guys. But, well, how do you bring the machine into the market, especially if you are an EU outside machine builder? You typically have distributors, importers of the machine. They have not been explicitly mentioned before. Maybe they have been meant by authorized representatives, but the definition was not so clear before. Now it's said clearly what is the liability of the importer and the distributor. For example, whoever is modifying the machine, no matter if it's the importer or distributor, becomes the machine builder, and therefore falls under the EU legislation for CE marking. So maybe the importer and distributor, when he modifies the machine, has to do, again, a risk analysis for the machine. And this is now clearly modified. What are the responsibilities?
So basically, the new machinery regulation kind of closes the gaps between the stuff that was unclear before. Is that kind of the way to take it?
Yeah, actually, yeah. When we had the discussions with our customers, it was always a bit unclear which standard to apply. Is the machine falling under this or that scope of the old regulation, or is this my responsibility or not? And yeah, one of the major topics was also substantial modification. I think you also in your previous career had these discussions a lot. When do we have to approve the machine? What is a substantial modification? There was room for interpretation. And well, nowadays with the new regulation, we see that there is a definition for it. So substantial modification, first of all, can be physical and digital. So also software can be substantial modification, explicitly added here. And also substantial is any modification that is not foreseen or planned by the manufacturer of the machine. Makes it also quite clear if you add something to a machine, then you become a machine builder. Creating new hazards or increasing existing risks. I think this is one of the core topics here. Whenever you add a new hazard to a system, or you increase an existing risk by adding something else, that's a substantial modification. And finally, you can see this also when you add a new significant protective measure, put a fence around the system or add some new safety detection measures. That's also a substantial modification and would need a new assessment of your system. So all in all, we can say the modifier becomes manufacturer. That's clear. I think it was also before in the standard, right?
That was, yeah, but it was not that's specifically added. Could you maybe for our listeners or viewers show maybe an example, a more concrete example where this would come into action that would maybe help? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So this example also comes to the last point here, conformity assessment limited to just modified parts. So assuming you have a logistics system, a warehouse system, for example, fenced off the AGVs, and now for some reason you have different types of goods where you need a forklift, an automated forklift, maybe you add to the system. Well, this forklift brings new risks, new hazards to your system. And for sure, you have to reapprove and check all the hazards coming from this newly added device to the whole of the system. So even so, there's a conformity assessment limited to the modified parts. If this machine is traveling around the whole factory floor, it can harm people on all of the factory floor. So that needs to be assessed, and that's a substantial modification in the end.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, there are even some more detailed functions. I just briefly go over them. I put them into different categories so that you can see what is the new EU regulation talking about. First of all, it's safety. Sure, it's all about safety in the standard, but what are the details here? Well, the software-based safety functions. That's one of the main topics. Also, the self-evolving safety functions. And finally, supervision and remote safe control of machines, and specifically also of AGV's AMRs. I will show you later on an example how that looks like and how you can solve that with technology available today. Security, that's also a major concern for all of us, not only in the office world, but especially also in the automation world and all-day work in the factory floor. The standard explicitly says that safety functions, they shall not be affected by any external access. You have to prevent any software safety functionality that can be modified remotely. Sometimes you want to have a remote update functionality, for example, for your machine. But the standard says clearly there are security requirements that these safety functions are not affected by external access, at least by unwanted external access. That's a clear security and safety growing together. We haven't seen that before that explicitly. Yeah, also protecting critical machine software parts against changes, whether it's authorization of people or keeping every access out of the machine. But yeah, once you want to add machines collaboratively and want to work together, you can't fully block the machine from the outside access. That's a difficulty coming up with security. But yeah, finally also preventing this unauthorized access. That's an explicit topic added. Then we see wireless features, wireless topics in the new regulation. For example, accessing the machine from safe positions. Well, how to do that? If it's a mobile machine or if it's a hazardous area, you need some remote access to the machine. So for example, remotely safe start and stop the machine. In some cases, you can't put wires here. So wireless is implicitly a new requirement coming from the regulation. And also separating local and remote AGV AMR safety functions. It's a clear requirement. You know, AGV's AMRs, they don't have a cable behind them, so they are working wirelessly. And yeah, remote safe functions are requested, and you can only access them by using some kind of wireless access. Diagnosis has becoming also more important, not only for the safety functions, so that you're sure that your safety function is still working, but also the diagnosis interface for automated machines to see in which state they are, what are they currently doing. In case of a mobile machine, to check if once you have stopped the machine, if you're allowed to restart the machine from a remote position. And finally, also detecting non-conformity of devices, like monitoring if a device is running out of its predefined parameters. Remote access, as mentioned before, also explicitly mentioned here. One side, it's the access to electronic machine documentation. That's a kind of remote access. Before, it was mandatory to have a printed manual somewhere. Now you can skip the printed manual and have everything on the machine stored. But in this case, you need remote access to the machine. Or how was your experience with printed machine documentation previously? Did you find that 5 years after you sent the machine to the field?
Well, it was always somewhere. Some people took it, and usually the stuff you wanted was either scribbled on because some changes were made and were put in with a pencil, and then the documents you were looking for were missing. So this need for paper documentation was kind of last century's thing, because with digital you have way more stuff to do.
Yeah, and luckily this new regulation puts this into focus. There are new ways of storing these things, but once you store it on the machine, it's clear you need to have the remote access. But at the same time, it needs to be also secure. So if someone is just wants to get the machine documentation, he shouldn't have access to the machine, to the subsystem network, to modify all the parameters. That places new risks by adding these simple things like storing electronic documentation on the machine. Yeah, and also a remote supervision function for HV AMRs explicitly added at several points in the new standard. Logging, whenever something happens with the machine, you want to know, what happened, and especially who was doing something with the machine before this happened. So logging any kind of malfunctions for later diagnosis, but also collecting modification evidence. That's a strong part here. And well, the standard doesn't tell how to do this exactly. If you have to collect this evidence on the machine itself, inside the engineering tool, or somewhere else, it's just said, whenever you modify the machine, wherever it is in the life cycle, can be also during operation, you have to store this information for at least 5 years. And that's quite a long time. So you have to have a very good and long-term storage for this kind of data. And finally, when it comes to these self-evolving machine functions, it's even more strict. So any decision causing the safety function to modify itself has to be stored for at least 1 year. Maybe that's the technical risk. I don't have an idea how to do that today, but well, there will be coming technology that can do that. It's a lot of data that has to be logged here.
So that's a lot of requirements that are added to this new regulation. The question is now, does it really become more complex to apply them?
Well, as always, it depends, I would say. We saw before, it's not the reinvention of the wheel with the new regulation. So there's not too much new things or totally changed things. When I was looking at the requirements from the standards and also the requirements I see from my customers, I see a kind of this balance you need here. So keeping the balance between automation and regulation. In some cases, we have customer requirements and expectations that are way higher than the normative requirements. So there's no standard covering customer features. And for sure, it becomes very complex to apply normative requirements if they're not there. If you just have a type A standard, you have to find your own ways to apply them to specific customer requirements. And therefore, the regulations in this case give, first of all, a general border. What can be done, what is technically feasible, and what can be also in the end safely certified or considered as safe operation. So it limits the automation system. Well, on the other side, some customer requirements are very small, very low, and the regulation side is more heavy in this case. So it's limited application requirements, and the applications, maybe they're covered by one or more standards, and it's hard to figure out which is the standard to be applied. Well, there's no change compared to before. So we already had before the EU regulation with this harmonized standards below. And it's always the task of the machine builder integrators to find the right matching standards to be applied. So it's not becoming more complex, but still we are waiting for the harmonized standard for the new regulation. So we can't tell exactly what is coming. What we know for sure is we have more standards on the security side. They haven't been harmonized before, and there will be for sure something coming new here. So, and in the end, the regulations in this case set the minimum safety function scope. And yeah, finding the right balance, that's the topic. When automation and regulation have to come together. First of all, identifying what is state of the art for safety and security for this type of application, for this requirement, and then match the application safety requirements with the regulation requirements that are active. By today, we have the EU machinery regulation from 2006, so still until 2027, you can apply what you already know from the market. So you know the regulations that are here, but the automation side, see this seesaw going a little bit up on the automation side, we see more requirements coming from automation, going to more cooperative machines, more flexible functionality, where the regulation side is dropping a bit. And now we see the seesaw going up a bit more on the regulation side coming from 2027 because of new regulation bringing new requirements to counterbalance what is required in automation. Yeah, so the machinery regulation here sets the overall framework. It's kind of the minimum requirements. And as said before, the manufacturers, they have to select the applicable harmonized standards depending on the application.
Okay, now we have seen lots of requirements from this new machinery regulation. Can you maybe pick, to make it clear, one concrete example of the application of this new regulation?
Yeah, when I prepared this webinar, I was thinking about, well, the audience, you come from the logistics area, and maybe this is a quite familiar example for you here. It's for the safe remote start and stop, which is a new requirement, explicit requirement in the coming regulation. And I was starting with, well, how does the system look today? If you have a fenced off HEV, you may have on the lower side, you see here the inside vehicle part, you have an in-vehicle controller, you have some safety logic already today, because already standards today request to have an emergency stop button locally on the device or to safely supervise the speed of the device. And there's also wireless communication because this vehicle needs to get information, jobs from the warehouse automation system, for example. So you need a wireless access point to the outside. And on the upper side, you see the factory floor, the outside automation system. Mainly here, the navigation, the warehouse logistics system controlling the fleet of AGVs, and also maybe a factory automation PLC that coordinates the cooperation with the existing machines that are there. So starting from 2027, the request is if people can come into the area where the mobile vehicles are driving, you have to have a remote safe start and stop functionality. How to do that? Well, first of all, on the outside, you have to add some protective measures like a safe door lock, which is creating a safe start or stop signal, indicating if it's good to go into the area where the mobile device is traveling or not. That can be easily linked to the factory automation PLC by using safety standard protocols here. So now we have the safe signal at the outside. So factory side knows if someone is opening the door, but how do we bring this information into the mobile device? It doesn't have safe communication to the outside today. Well, in this case, what needs to be added is safe communication capabilities inside the vehicle. And that can be done very simple. We have the wireless signal path already available. It is needed anyway to control the vehicle on the non-safe side. And now by adding safety protocols, we have these safe I/O channels already tunneled into the device. So just adding the remote safe start stop signal fulfills the new requirements from the machine regulations starting from 2027. So There's a new way of thinking, I would say, because new requirements are coming up for the machine builders, and these are the explicit examples for the safe remote start-stop. There's way more. We also see in the standards like 3691-4 new requirements for acting differently in cooperation zones. So we have 4 or 5 different zones defined in that standard, where different kind of safety functions are needed in the future.
All right, thank you very much. So yeah, that was quite a lot of information, I guess, for those 42 minutes now. I just want at the end of this webinar kind of do a little wrap up to see, okay, what we covered or what comes with the new machinery regulations. So basically, it's all about the communication. So machines, if we want to add more machines to a maybe a logistics center, they must be more communicative. So they have to send more signals in and out, have maybe to talk to each other or to a higher control system. So that's one thing, they have to communicate more. But that means, because when they communicate more, or when they are more open to communication, this means we have more threats coming from the outside. We have more attack points for people who want to do harm. So we get this security, which gets more and more of a vital part of the machine. Like I said earlier, where safety is protecting humans from machines, security is basically protecting machines from humans. So we want them to communicate more, so that's why we want to make them more secure. Also, we have this topic of mobile robots, this mobile machines. They are explicitly added to this new machinery regulation because they exactly do this, what we see on top here. They have to be more communicative, and because they are not wired, they have to have wireless communication. This can be a huge security threat if you don't have it under control. So these are the main takeaways currently that we wanted to show you. There's a lot more, like Stefan said, and I guess this will not be the last time that we talk about this new regulation, because there's a lot of things to cover here. But this was the 3 basic ones we want you to take away from this webinar. And then, of course, we as HMS got you covered on all those spaces. We just want to show you, okay, if you want this secure remote connection, if you want to connect to your machines from the outside, we as HMS, we got our E1 product line who does ISO 27001 conformant remote access or remote monitoring. We got with this remote access solution, we also get cloud connectivity so that you get your data from your machines wherever you are in the world. We got, for the more local ones, for the OT stuff, we got the wireless solutions where you can, those mobile machines, connect them to each other, which are also able to, like Stefan said earlier, really transfer those safe signals to make sure you get your safe stop signal from your safe door log onto your AGV or AMR. And on your AMR, you need some hardware to interpret those safe signals. Also, that's part of the Ixxat portfolio of HMS, where we have safe hardware that you can put into your machines to make sure, all those signals really get where they have to be and those machines stop in a safe way. Also, that can be done via software where we offer software stacks. Just contact us, Stefan or myself. We can give you information on that. That's no problem. And of course, one thing why we see ourselves also as a vital part of the EU machinery regulation, a vital part for our daily life, is because we produce all of our products that go to Europe. We produce in Europe, so we also have to abide by those standards and regulations. So that's basically what we as HMS can offer you with our E1, Anybus, or Ixxat product lines. Contact your sales representative, distributor. Contact us directly as soon as you have any issues, any questions. We're more than happy to help you.
Thank you very much. As I say, it's been really informative. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Daniel, for your time this morning. And I look forward to working with you again in the future and helping our customers with their logistics questions and information. So thank you, audience. Thank you all for joining us today. We will leave you hopefully in a healthy, safe and secure situation with all your machine building in the future, and look forward to talking to you about your projects. So that's it from us. Thank you and goodbye from me.
Thank you.
Thanks for your attendance. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.